When I joined a sorority, I bonged relish from a beer bong, like relish that you'd put on a sandwich or a hot
Bong? I
dog.
don't even know what that
I drank it, a jar of relish.
to join.
Yeah.
How much of
Yeah.
this can stay in? I need all of this to be the open of this episode.
Well, I joined the weird sorority, like with the weird girls. So
I mean, you bonged relish.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, most of them just had to drink beer, but mine was like relish.
relish.
Or you're not weird enough.
I mean, at least they're changing things up a little bit. At least
Yeah.
it's not a cliche.
Yeah, I didn't want to be in
Yeah.
one of the normal sororities, that
Exactly.
just
Everyone
didn't
else
fit
doing
me.
that stuff. I need the bong relish.
Yeah,
And
it was
okay.
at a frat house too.
Accurate. This sounds
Yeah.
like the opening scene of like a 2007 not another teen movie sort of thing. That's
Yeah.
exactly what this sounds like.
Right.
So do we have to have that in our cult? Like, is that what, do we have to have something like that?
Yeah.
Or is it just like fun trips to a Renaissance festival?
No, I think we should pressure people to do things.
Good. I think we should. You know what? With that mindset, I think we could
Yeah.
also be politicians.
Yeah, we could. Yeah.
There's a lot of, all right, folks, we got to get this episode out of the way.
Yeah.
There's a lot of planning
We don't know if we're going to be good at this.
that we have to
but
do.
yeah.
Let's start it out with this. Let's see if we can share cool things on a podcast with people. And then if that works, we can take the next step into starting this cult.
Yeah, baby steps.
And then
Yeah.
maybe politicians
Yeah.
one day.
Okay.
Possibly.
Then
we
the
just
relish.
we just deteriorate as people.
Yeah.
Basically is what happens. Yeah. Podcasters sharing their opinion, not the worst thing.
Yeah.
Starts a cult, forces people to do things, kind of bad. Politician, worst you could be.
Right.
That's pretty much what
Worst you can be.
we're going to gradually go down. Well, folks, before we deteriorate and our lives just crumble beneath us, welcome to the show. This is a 15-minute Friday where myself and a returning guest sit down one more time, not to talk about cults or to start them. That's for another show. But we're going to talk about a very specific subject this week. So joining me for this episode, my friend and fellow cult leader, I suppose at this point, cult cabinet member.
Huzzah.
I don't know what that is our saying.
Huzzah.
Meg Pando, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for sitting down with me and talking about a lot of dumb things, but then also changing our gears over into talking about some very cool things. I hope we make them sound cool.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to try and
Oh,
do.
yeah.
So this episode, we are talking about the idea of deep work and finding your flow state. Now, I think that I, in an unaware way, do these things. I don't think I consciously make these decisions of like, yes, I'm going to work to get into my quote unquote flow state, or I'm going to work to do deep work or whatever. Because I truthfully, when you brought this up to me, I don't know necessarily what deep work is. So let's maybe start this episode with that.
Yeah.
What is deep work and a flow state?
Well, deep work is what you need to be doing when your phone isn't ringing and there's no other distractions and you're just focused on what you're doing. So it could be creative. I think to me, flow state I've always defined as like a creative flow state where creative ideas or creative designs are just kind of flowing out of you. But deep work is not always fun work. It's just something that you really need to concentrate on. So they're a little bit different. Deep work can be QuickBooks. And it can be things that you just hate doing and they're taxing, and creating reports and building a pitch deck for somebody, stuff that you don't necessarily enjoy, but you really do need to get into a concentrated state to get them done. And that's sometimes a struggle because you don't enjoy them and you don't want to ignore distractions to get them
Right.
done. Yeah.
Okay.
Whereas I think flow state is that creative, it's almost like a spiritual experience sometimes where you're like, wow, I just made this happen, or I just came up with all of these ideas and they just flowed out of me. And like you mentioned, sometimes it happens to you at 1 a.m. Is it always late at night?
It tends to always be late at night. So that for me is like, that's why I'm like, I think I have a flow state, but I don't necessarily know how to trigger it or how to enter myself into it, because like there's a lot of days where I'll sit all day and I'll be trying to like work on something.
Yeah.
And it just like doesn't really come to me, and I'm just like, okay, I don't know. I'm just like, something's not clicking. Something's not like, I just don't know. And then by like literally super late at night, I feel like my brain tends to turn on late at night, which I know that's like the joke is like, you're laying in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, thinking about your entire life. Like I know everybody does that. But I do think when it comes to for me at least, with a idea or creative flow state, that is when mine tends to turn on. It's like in the middle of the night, even if I'm sitting all day and could not think of the thing I wanted to do, somehow that flow will just kick in the middle of the night. And I'll be like, oh, I know exactly what to do. How did I not think of this before?
Right.
And I'll just sit and just like one thing to another, to another, to another, either beginning and finishing a process, start to finish in one thing and getting everything done. Or it's also just a constant flow of ideas of like, oh, I could do this, and that's exactly how I could do it. Oh, and then I could do this, and that's exactly how I could do it. So that to me, like, I think that's a flow state, right? Like getting just, and allowing yourself to fall into that.
Yeah.
Like,
And that makes sense because like as humans, the chemicals in our body, our hormones and everything are all different at night, actually, than they are during the day. I recently read that's why you can become more emotional at night if you're going through, a bad week. You might feel it at night, and then when you wake up in the morning, you're like, wow, I was really like overreacting last night. Like I was really feeling that, It's because what's going on in our bodies is different at nighttime. So it makes sense. Plus you don't have the distractions of the daytime. You don't have your phone ringing. You don't have the hustle and bustle around you. Maybe you're not at a coffee shop or at the office, but you're just at home. And it almost can become a meditative state, because when you meditate, think about it, you're focusing on the sounds and what you're seeing, and all of your sensory. You can meditate based on all of those different senses. But then if somebody starts cutting the grass next to you, you can't meditate anymore. It happens to me all the time. Or somebody comes by with a leaf blower, or my kid starts screaming and crying.
I should think I just saw you post about that
I did.
recently, where
The
you were
leaf
like, I'm
blowing
trying
guy.
to meditate, and there's just somebody like,
Yeah. I've been wanting to really approach him and talk to him about this issue, but he needs to use his leaf blower in a different neighborhood. So I will talk to him eventually about that. But anyways, that's why those distractions can kind of destroy our meditative state. And so when you're alone at home at night, it makes sense that you can really get into that creative thought process.
Right. And so that's probably why a lot of like the memes and jokes about people laying in bed, planning out their entire life and how it's going to change the next morning, and then you don't wake up until 11 and you don't go to the gym, or you don't eat healthy for lunch. Like, I guess that does make sense of like that stuff is cognitively firing off a lot more in the middle of the night, which of course would make us think all of these things. Now, for you, like, when did you even discover the idea of a flow state or of deep work, like either of these things? And like, when did you discover them? When did you put them into use? And maybe more so, why did you feel like, okay, yes, like clearly they're positive things, but like, what was the thing that you were like, this is needed, I need to focus on these things?
Yeah, I think when I first started my first business years ago, it was only me. I was the only employee. And so I had full control over my day. So I'd go to a coffee shop and get some work done. Then I'd get a change of scenery and go somewhere else and get some work done, or go to my studio at 400 West and get this other work done. But then when you have people that work with you or for you, then they're asking you questions throughout the day, or they're like interrupting your deep work or your flow state. And I was finding myself really like almost frustrated every time someone would talk to me, because I'd be like, I'm getting stuff done, why are you talking to me? It's like, oh yeah, I'm their boss, I need to tell them what to do. I need to give them direction on this thing and that thing. And so I just realized I needed to break up my day and not expect myself to get into a concentrated state of mind of that deep work or that flow state in the middle of the day, when I have like 4 employees working around me, and I'm also responsible for setting the tone in that room and making sure that the atmosphere is what they deserve to have at work, and that it's a good positive atmosphere to work in, and that I'm being my goofy self, because that's what they enjoy, working around. And how can I make sure that I'm balancing all of that while concentrating on what I really do need to get done too. So I started to break up my day, and part of it, like a segment of it, like 4 or 5 hours would be that deep work where I have uninterrupted concentration. And then in the next few hours, I'd be working with people in a collaborative setting. And then the next few hours, I might be doing something fun, going for a walk, or, taking an actual lunch break, which I didn't used to take either. So I think realizing that you don't have a balance, and maybe even hitting rock bottom when you're just like burnt out, is a good thing, because then you start to learn, like, I need to segment my day out, and I need to create a more healthy routine in day-to-day life for myself.
Let's talk about the idea of like setting expectations for ourselves
Yeah.
and all of this, because I feel like something that kind of goes into this is the idea of like, what do I need to do today? What do I need to get done this week? That comes in the form of like to-do lists and all that sort of stuff. And like, there's a handful of different ways we can go with like the whole to-do list thing, but I also think that in general is just setting expectations for like, I'm going to get this amount of stuff done today, or I have to, or I need to, or whatever it is, figuring out what your priorities are and are not. How does the idea of like setting expectations, either maybe too high even, how does that work with this whole like deep work process or flow state process?
Yeah, I think setting your expectations too high and then disappointing yourself day after day. So at the end of the day, you're just like, I didn't get X, Y, and Z done, but you got the rest of the alphabet done. You still did a lot, or maybe you just got one big thing done, but you didn't meet your expectations. So just disappointing yourself over and over and over again is just going to lead to more burnout, and then you will hit rock bottom. So when you set those expectations, everybody's different. I know for me, instead of creating a to-do list each day, I actually have to create a to-do list for the next 5 days, and then I number each thing that I'm doing. So if there's 15 items on that list of things I'm going to do over the next 5 days, it's 1 through 15. And so when I wake up on Monday morning, I do 1. And I make that list like the week before, because I just want the next week to be ready for me Monday morning, or else I'm going to be in a bad mood when I wake up and I have 70 emails and I don't know which one's most important. So I think numbering those things, but also just spreading them out over a couple days and not saying like, these are the 15 things I'm going to do on Monday. Like, you might wake up and not be feeling that Monday. So just give yourself the whole week and expect yourself to get these things done over 5 days. So
Yeah.
I find that to be really helpful for me.
I'm definitely big on that idea. When it comes to the idea of a to-do list, I'm big on the idea of giving myself the grace of, if I have 5 things on my list and I only get 2 of them done, I'm not going to beat myself up over, you only got 2 done, you were supposed to do all 5.
Yeah.
Let's look at it from the standpoint of, you got 2 done.
Yeah.
You still got something done. And of course, it's based off of your priorities, right? If number 5 actually needed to be number 1, then yeah, we got to reconfigure, that list for the week or the day or whatever it is a little bit more. If it's a priority, yes, it can't be put at the bottom of the list or whatever. And then of course you're going to beat yourself up over it.
Right.
But that expectation thing is big. And that's something that I did a lot of work on over the last handful of years, because I would absolutely get stuck in the hustle and grind mentality years ago of like, I have to do everything all the time. But I feel like focusing on when you're the best focused, when you can flow either creatively or just thoughts or anything like that, when you can flow the best, and learning to capture those moments of time. That is what I feel like I unlocked over the last handful of years, and allowed myself to like, okay, maybe it's okay to not be on all the time.
Yeah.
But what can I do with my time and energy when I am on?
Right.
Or how can I get myself into that state of like, okay, I'm like you said, like I love the idea of like, all right, these hours of the day from this time to this time is going to be my deep work focus. Maybe I'm going to do some things that aren't the most flashy or colorful, but things that I know need to be done. Because then I'm assuming that when you get those things done, or if you do, then when you get into more of a flow state style of working, you probably feel a little less pressure.
Right.
Like, is that probably like how it is? Is that like the balance that you find, or?
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of like a puppy. I'm a little bit more rewards based. So I need to be like, oh, I'm going to get a scoop of Jenny's ice cream if I reconcile all of my QuickBooks.
Fair. Very fair.
And then I feel like that's also really like encouraging to me to finally get those things done, but also just rewarding myself and remembering, that I feel like, I was similar to you in that like hustle culture felt like a positive thing. And people were constantly like, oh, you're so successful at a young age. Look at the business you've built. Like, you really hustled for this. And I'm like, yeah, I hustled. It was really fun.
It's great. I work all night, every night. Thank God I don't have a 9 to 5.
Yeah, I don't have a soul. Remember that Soul movie that came out like right during the pandemic, the Disney or Pixar movie?
The one with
the little blue souls.
Oh, wait. I remember it, but I never watched it.
Oh, you got to watch it.
I didn't know when I wanted to watch it because I needed to like prepare myself to be emotional.
Yeah.
So there was just never that moment of, talk about planning ahead.
That's a really beautiful movie that to me really stomps on hustle culture, because it just shows like life and death, and also says like life isn't about what you accomplish, and it's not about how hard you hustle or even what you build. It's about the joyful moments that you have while you're living your life. And maybe if you build something along the way, cool, you built something along the way, but more importantly, you did what you loved. And the recognition is gone when you die. I mean, it's the recognition for what you built doesn't necessarily live on either. Like when you die, none of that actually matters. You don't take any of that to the grave. All you take to the grave is the joyful moments that you had.
Yeah, it's not about who can die with the most things.
Yeah.
Like that, yeah.
Yeah. But that movie's just so beautiful, and I think that's when I started to realize, like, wow, hustle culture really did affect me in a lot of negative ways when it comes to my expectations of myself, and just burning myself out constantly. So
now, before we recorded, you had mentioned kind of like how this relates to being able to balance out life with like ADHD and all that sort of stuff. Like, do we want to touch on that, like, before we wrap up the episode or anything? Like how, I don't know, how you identified those things, maybe how, like, has this process of working, has it helped? Does it help you kind of balance all of these things with like both life and career? Or
yeah, I mean, I've always had ADHD. So when I was homeschooled, I really thrived. I mean, I was like testing into like the 98th, 99th percentile in the nation in my age group. I skipped a grade. I was just like this super smart kid. And then I went to high school and I almost failed. And it was because like my ADHD was something that was allowing me to thrive in a homeschool environment where I could control my own education and the way I was learning and how things were hands-on, and I could become fixated on something that I loved and enjoyed and just really study that and excel at that. Whereas in school, I was sitting at a desk and just being told things, and I was supposed to remember them, and that's not very ADHD friendly. And then now, later on in life, what ADHD looks like to me is sometimes becoming hyper fixated on one thing that I'm building within my business. Maybe I'm updating like the project menu over at Makers. I might do that for like 3 days straight, and I'm just like obsessed with it. So in some ways that can be unhealthy if I'm not giving myself breaks and like letting myself relax a little bit. But in other ways, it's just amazing because it is that flow state of being super creative and just like letting myself and my obsession with and my fixation on this certain project just really manifest and create what I need to create. I mean, that's how I built Makers. Was I became obsessed with working with leather and working with wood and working with jewelry, and I was just doing them constantly and becoming an expert at all of those things and experimenting with them for 3 years straight. So it was just like a creative heaven for me and for my ADHD, because that's like kind of how I thrived.
So as we wrap up,
Yeah.
I'm sure someone can look at this and maybe like they could probably look at deep work and flow state and be like, those are two completely different things.
Yeah.
Do you feel like they actually kind of play together necessarily? Like, do they work into each other in a way? Or have we just been talking about two completely different things but meshing them together in one episode?
Well, I don't think that you can have the flow state without the deep work, because you have to give yourself that space to get into that creative flow state. So I would encourage people to kind of see deep work as a segment of time in your life when you have no distractions and you can just focus on one thing that you want to accomplish and you want it to unfold in some way or another. And maybe it is creative, maybe it's not, but give yourself that space and that concentration and that alone time. And it doesn't even have to be in work. It can also just be in fitness, in yoga, in anything. Like, just be alone with that thing so you can really focus on it. And then you'll experience a flow state within that project or that experience that you want to experience. And you'll find creativity in it, even if it's not a creative thing. So
I definitely couldn't have said it any better myself, because I didn't even know the definitions of these things when we started this episode. But now I think I got a pretty good grasp. And now when I'm up super late at night working on things and someone's like, why are you awake at 3 a.m. texting me a design or a script you just made, I can be like, I'm in my flow state, okay? I spent all day in my deep work state,
Yeah.
so I could be in my flow state
Right.
at 3 a.m. and text people random
Exactly.
things. Meg, is there anything left that maybe we haven't touched on or we haven't said that you feel like, hey, if somebody's listening to this, this is honestly the big thing that I would want you to take away from this. This is how to get yourself into the flow of either a flow state or into working in a deep work routine into your day? Or do you feel like we covered everything?
I feel like I do feel like taking time away from. I feel like deep work needs to happen during a time in the day when it's realistic, and I think with our phones dinging all the time, like maybe just like turn them off or turn them on silent and make sure that it's a realistic time, because if you let yourself down and you don't get into that state, then you might not give yourself that grace to do it another day. So just be realistic that it's really hard to do in 2022.
That is very fair. And that rhymed.
Yeah.
I like that. I like that at the
Yes.
end. Meg, if anybody wants to find you around the internet or anything that you do, maybe they want to come talk to you about some advice or opinion on all of this and how it's worked for you and how you've balanced it with your wonderful businesses, where can they find all of those things at?
Yeah, my Franklinton business is called Maker Social. It's over at the River and Rich building next to One Line in Citrine, and it's a DIY project bar where you can make stuff and drink at the same time. So I'm usually over there sitting on the patio. Love to have meaningful conversations, so come sit down and talk to me.
I would love if you ever told me that somebody walked by and you're like,
People
hey,
do that all the time.
someone just walked by and said, hey, you're Megan Pando
Oh,
from that
no.
podcast.
Yeah,
I want to
that would
talk
be
to you
amazing.
about a flow state.
No, but I do end up sometimes like in tears with strangers on the patio having a heart to heart, and then my
that is
employees are like,
incredible.
"Can you stop? Like
No,
you're
I love that.
embarrassing."
Don't stop that.
Yeah.
Keep doing that, please. I
Oh,
love that.
but sometimes it ends with like us having to call security
Oh.
on me. I'm just kidding.
Hey, can somebody get this owner out of here, please?
No. Yeah, we won't get into that, but
That's for another 15
thank you
minute
so
Friday.
much for having me.
Thank you so much for being down to do these.
Yeah.
See, this is where we control the conversations. We can have fun, heartfelt conversations.
Yeah.
And there's no security here that's going to kick you out.
Right.
You know.
I can't get kicked out of my own business.
You can't. Well, you can't. You really can't. I mean, if I drive by one day and I see you kicking and flailing in securities, I'm like, man, Meg just had a deep conversation with somebody.
Yeah, exactly. And it ended rough.